Welcome back, friends, to another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Today's guest will remain anonymous. She's a 23-year-old social worker who was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 18 years old. Today, we talk a little bit about her diagnosis, but we also talk about people and how they react to different life situations. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. AG1 is offering my listeners a free $76 gift when you sign up. You'll get a welcome kit, a bottle of D3K2, and 5 free travel packs in your first box. So make sure you check out drinkag1.com/juicebox to get this offer. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. Are you an adult living with type 1 or the caregiver of someone who is? And a U.S. resident? If you'd like to help with type 1 research, but don't have time to go to a doctor or an investigation, and you want to do something right there from your sofa, this is the way. T1dexchange.org/juicebox. It should not take you more than about 10 minutes. The episode you're about to enjoy was brought to you by Dexcom. The Dexcom G7, the same CGM that my daughter wears. You can learn more and get started today at my link, Dexcom.com/juicebox. Today's episode is sponsored by the Tandem Mobi system with Control-IQ Plus technology. If you are looking for the only system with auto bolus, multiple wear options, and full control from your personal iPhone, you're looking for Tandem's newest pump and algorithm. Use my link to support the podcast, tandemdiabetes.com/juicebox. Check it out. Your name is Emily Thompson.
All right, epic.
All right, Emily. How old were you when you got type 1 diabetes?
I was 19. I was actually diagnosed when I was taking my gap year after high school. Mm-hmm. So I was diagnosed in not America, in a foreign country. So that was my diagnosis story.
Were you out on like just kind of finding yourself kind of thing? Were you doing good work somewhere? What were you doing?
I was actually in like a program. It was in Israel. So I was in a program in Israel, and it's kind of like just kind of, I guess, getting in touch with, Jewish roots, really just, they had a really great program. Like, we learned, we also went on great trips. So I was diagnosed there. And like, I remember I was actually diagnosed after like a particularly intense hike when I was in Israel. My family's super outdoorsy. So like we would like do hikes all the time. So I obviously started in front because like I'm super experienced in this, you know what I'm saying? And I remember by the end, I was in the back, I couldn't move. And I turned to like, I guess like the counselor that was on the trip. And I'm like, I'm not able to move right now. And she's like, okay. So she kind of like pushed me up the remaining of the trip, which was just ladders. That was the hike. The second half of the trip was just ladders. So she was like behind me and like kind of pushing me up and that's when I was like, okay, I feel like something's probably wrong at this point. Right. Like if I can't do a hike that I'm like always able to do hikes, like probably I should go to the doctor. You know what I'm saying? Like it might be a good idea.
Was that the conversation then? Were you thinking, I think something's wrong?
Like I had like basically every symptom. All right. But I was able to like push them all away, like with like, reasoning it out. I was like, oh, like I'm losing tons of weight, but like I'm walking a lot and I'm super healthy. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Or like, yeah, like I'm super thirsty and I have to go to the bathroom like a million times, but
I'm finally getting all that water people tell you to drink.
Right. Like my father's like, listen, like, you're in Israel. It's really hot climate. Like you need to drink a lot of water. I'm like, right. This makes so much sense. Why I have to go to wake up 5 times in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like that follows.
Are you, by the way, super amused that the internet picked Emily Thompson and then your story begins in Israel? I love that. I just love how not Jewish Emily Thompson sounds. It's my favorite part of this so far.
I forgot that my name's Emily Thompson. I'm vibing with it. I think it's good. I think it's good.
I mean, I know you, and it's pretty far from your name. You know what I mean? It's awesome. Okay, so you're out on that, you're having that experience. Do you go seek medical attention right then and there?
So there actually is a guide on our trip. And like, I'm not really sure. And like, he's like a medic, right? I don't really know why he wasn't like, oh, maybe I should check your numbers. And like, I don't know, he's a medic. He's supposed to do this stuff. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not really sure why he didn't. I actually do know why he didn't. A week before, he had tested someone's numbers on the trip and she didn't have diabetes. And the school was really mad at him for it. So I think that's why he was nervous to do it, but like really he should have. So like I was just chilling. Like I threw up tons of times in this trip. Like it was not a great trip for me.
You're in DKA, do you think?
Oh, I'm in DKA at this point. Like I remember like people are like, people are, you're nauseous. People are like, oh, drink like eat rice cakes and have pretzels. And I'm like, ew. I cannot look at another carb. You know what I'm saying? Like my body knew that carbs were not for me at this point. I couldn't look at another pretzel. I couldn't look at another rice cake.
Emily, how interesting is it that the medic the week prior thought, hey, I might have a person with me who has undiagnosed diabetes. And then when they actually had somebody with undiagnosed diabetes, that the first experience stopped them from looking again.
I know. Like, I feel like that's the weirdest coincidence ever.
Yeah.
I clearly was not supposed to be diagnosed in this trip. I got diagnosed the next day, like after this trip was over. Mm-hmm. It was good. It was really literally in the middle of nowhere. So I'm happy that like none of us decided that it'd be a good idea to go to the doctor because like it would have been really inconvenient. So
how does the diagnosis happen? This episode is sponsored by Tandem Diabetes Care. And today I'm going to tell you about Tandem's newest pump and algorithm. The Tandem Mobi system with Control-IQ Plus technology features auto bolus, which can cover missed meal boluses and help prevent hyperglycemia. It has a dedicated sleep activity setting and is controlled from your personal iPhone. Tandem will help you to check your benefits today through my link, tandemdiabetes.com/juicebox. This is going to help you to get started with Tandem's smallest pump yet, that's powered by its best algorithm ever. Control-IQ Plus technology helps to keep blood sugars in range by predicting glucose levels 30 minutes ahead, and it adjusts insulin accordingly. You can wear the Tandem Mobi in a number of ways. Wear it on body with a patch-like adhesive sleeve that is sold separately, clip it discreetly to your clothing, or slip it into your pocket. Head now to my link, tandemdiabetes.com/juicebox to check out your benefits and get started today. You can manage diabetes confidently with the powerfully simple Dexcom G7. Dexcom.com/juicebox. The Dexcom G7 is the CGM that my daughter is wearing. The G7 is a simple CGM system that delivers real-time glucose numbers to your smartphone or smartwatch. The G7 is made for all types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2, but also people experiencing gestational diabetes. The Dexcom G7 can help you spend more time in range, which is proven to lower A1C. The more time you spend in range, the better and healthier you feel. And with the Dexcom Clarity app, you can track your glucose trends, and the app will also provide you with a projected A1C in as little as 2 weeks. If you're looking for clarity around your diabetes, you're looking for Dexcom. Dexcom.com/juicebox. When you use my link, you're supporting the podcast. Dexcom.com/juicebox. Head over there now.
I decided that it's a good idea to go to the doctor. So I went to the doctor the next day and then they sent me and I basically told them all my symptoms. And then they're like, I think you might have diabetes. And I'm like, okay, rewind to this. A friend of mine weeks earlier had listed all the symptoms that I was having also. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the doctor told her that she didn't have diabetes. So I'm like, listen, I also don't have diabetes because my friend has all these same symptoms and she doesn't have diabetes. Right. And I remember like thinking to myself, I'm like, do I have diabetes? Like these are the symptoms. And I'm being like, no, I can't handle diabetes. Like that's ridiculous. So then for the next few weeks, I just didn't have diabetes. You know what I'm saying?
You went to a doctor who told you had diabetes and you said, no, I don't?
No, my friend did.
I think I'm confused. You're on the trip. You're on the Jewish ladder trip. And then you're diagnosed the next day?
Yeah. So meaning like weeks earlier, my friend had gone to the doctor for all the same symptoms I had and was told that like, no, she doesn't have diabetes. So since I had all the same symptoms and she didn't have diabetes, I figured I also didn't have diabetes. Right.
Okay.
So when the next day when I went to like the doctor and they're like, you probably have diabetes, it wasn't like an overly shocked for me because I was kind of like, I had been in denial about this for the past few weeks anyways, that I probably had diabetes. So it wasn't like overly shocking, but like, it was still kind of like, wait, but like my friend didn't have it. So like, I was also not supposed to have it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. How old are you at that point?
19. Maybe 18 still.
Yeah, I was going to say that's some pretty 18, 19-year-old thinking you had going on there.
I know, 100%. I was majorly in that like adolescent 18-year-old, like not. I also was like really probably high all the time. So it makes sense that my brain wasn't working so well. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense that like in my adult high brain, I wasn't really thinking so logically. So it didn't, yeah. So like that was it. And then they sent me to the hospital right away. So like my dorm mother came with me, went to the hospital, and they're like, yeah, you have diabetes, you have DKA. So I was like in the hospital. I was in the ICU for a few days, and then I got admitted to like the regular ward. And since I was already 18, I was with like all the really old people who also had internal medicine people. So like there was like people who had diabetes and like their like legs and like they had legs amputated. You know what I'm saying? Like that was the ward of the people I was in.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, I was like this like 18-year-old who like really probably should have still been in like the pediatrics. And then there was like all these like dying people on the ward of me. And it was just like, okay.
Did that get through that 18-year-old brain of yours? Like, were you like freaked out by that? Or did you just think, oh, I'm not like these people?
I just remember thinking like, man, like, I don't feel like I belong here. Like, I don't really know why I'm here. Like, I remember like thinking like, I feel like I should be in the kids' place. Like, that was kind of like what my thoughts were. And like, also, all the doctors were treating me like, the nurses were treating me like a type 2 patient because like those were the people they were seeing. Mm-hmm. So they're like, no, you can't have ice cream. So then I was like, no, I need ice cream. So then I asked my mom to sneak in ice cream and I had ice cream.
I was going to ask where your parents were doing this.
So my mom actually flew in. She like told her boss, she's like, listen, I know. She's like, listen, like I have to go fly into my daughter. And he's like, well, all right. So my dad stayed home to take care of like, my other siblings and, to uphold his job. Yeah. My mom like flew in and she was there with me in the hospital for that week. My grandmother also lives in Israel. So she was also there with me. So I really had a lot of support. I was very great. I was very lucky.
I see.
So I would sometimes get my mom to sneak me food in. I didn't like their type 2 advice that I couldn't eat food. I wasn't down for that. So.
Do you have other type 1s in your family?
No type 1s. My uncle probably has LADA. Like eventually now he has type 1, but he was diagnosed when he was like 32 or something with type 1. So I guess he's type 1, but like he was diagnosed super late.
So then Emily, yes, your uncle is your answer.
But it's weird because like he was undiagnosed for like 5 years.
Yeah, he was probably just at a very slow onset.
Right, yeah. Right. So I guess, yeah. Mm-hmm. Like if I had been home, like my mom would have known in a minute. This was her brother. Like she would have been able to pick up on these symptoms. But because I was so far away from home, no one knew me. You know what I'm saying? So like no one thought it was weird that I drastically lost 40 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
That didn't ring a red flag for everyone.
Your uncle was diagnosed prior to your diagnosis?
Yeah.
I see. Okay. So then, I mean, once you know that you have type 1 and your mom is there with you, does she have context? Does she reach to your uncle for advice? Like, how do you begin managing?
We were really lucky. There was someone in Israel who like somehow got hold of us. And then she was literally like our lifesaver. Like she was amazing. She like had all the answers, all the resources. So she like was kind of like my diabetes mother, like during that year and really helped a lot in terms of explaining things. Mm-hmm. She was able to get me into the pediatric clinic, which was incredible. Like literally I just so much praise for how they handled everything. They actually gave me the option to go on a pump right away. I didn't take it up because I was too stressed about learning everything. Like, I went with my mom the first time. Then when my mom went back to home, like I had seen them every few weeks. I like stayed by family the first few weeks after diagnosis. They really took care of me. They were also incredible. Like so much, just so grateful for them that I had them there also. I went back to seminary. I went back to the program.
Really?
And just, I was determined. I was like, I'm not letting this stop my year. So I took like 2 or 3 weeks to kind of like recover a little bit. And then I was back. I was determined not to let it stop me. I was not going to cut my year short for that. Like, no.
Well, that's awesome. Because that's what I really did think you were going to end up going home with your mom, but no. So your mom bugs out eventually and you stay for how much longer?
I think that I'm by my aunt and uncle, by my family there for another 2 weeks before I gradually like went back to school.
And school was where?
School was in Jerusalem,
Okay.
heart and center of, Israel.
So you went to college in Israel.
It's like, I wouldn't call it college. Like I did get credits for it, but like, it's more like just like learning more about, just Judaism. And it's also kind of a lot of like just practical tools for life, like meaning like, okay, like interacting with people, like, figuring yourself out, building family, like kind of like really just practical tools for life. So it didn't feel like a college in the sense like, oh, I'm going for my degree and learning this, it kind of felt like a me year where I got to like really focus and like learn and gain,
right.
And like self-develop. So like diabetes definitely raised that bar a lot in terms of self-development and growth that year.
How so? How do you think your experience ended up changing because of the diabetes diagnosis while you were there?
So it definitely prompted me, like in high school, you start thinking a little bit about what I wanted to do. And like, I kind of played with the idea of like, maybe a counselor, maybe a therapist, maybe like biology, because like biology is super cool. I feel like diabetes was like, okay, like now I have diabetes and like I live biology and it is really cool. When I have my midlife crisis, I might become an endocrinologist because like, hello, body is super cool. But I feel like I got enough of my bio stuff for now. And I really decided from that year, I'm like, hey, I'm going to social work. Like I see that this is a big need out there. I want to kind of help to be there, to be able to, support people, especially with chronic illness, but really anything.
How old are you today?
I am 23.
23. And you are a social worker now?
I am a social worker. Went to school for it, got my master's. All the papers that I could, I really focused towards chronic illness from various factors. So meaning like, for cultural diversity, I'm like, okay, chronic illness and cultural diversity, like got interesting statistics there. It's like, okay, Erickson and developmental and like, how does your development affect when you get a chronic illness, So like, I really kind of like made that my mission throughout school to kind of like really get a better understanding of like how chronic illness affects you from like all the various kind of factors and like areas of life.
What do you think are some of the obvious ones where the chronic illness impacts?
So meaning in terms of like cultural diversity, meaning like there is a really high correlation between stress and diabetes control, chronic illness in general. But meaning like where I see it particularly pronounced, I can see this even in my own life. And, I'm very happy to not, like I'm very fortunate, but like meaning like stress releases cortisol. When you have cortisol in your body, it's like, oh, it tells liver, oh, release glucose. We need glucose to fight right now, right? That's the kind of the response. It leads to insulin resistance. So it has both effect. Like it literally it tells your liver to produce glucose in your body. And that also has insulin resistance. So meaning like anytime you can see, like anytime you're stressed, it's going to be harder for you to control your numbers, right? Yeah. Because you have insulin resistance. You have more glucose in your body. And kind of like seeing those like numbers and statistics, I'm like, whoa, like that is, first of all, it's super validating. Second of all, that makes so much sense. Because like I see like, going through school was obviously stressful. Like there's a lot of essays.
Do you mean validating because you feel like you're doing the right things, but your blood sugars are going all over the place and you think like, I don't even understand like what this is. But then once you have that other piece of information, that makes more sense. And it feels less like you're just messing up and more like this is the variable that you didn't know about.
Yeah. I really thought that was like I saw that as a huge variable. I mean, I remember like I was done school or I was maybe in between semesters or whatever. And I'm like, wow, my numbers, they're just so much easier. I'm like, oh, it's because I'm not in school anymore. I'm not like forever writing papers and studying, what I'm saying? And it's like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, just kind of like seeing that so played out. And it's like, well, that's frustrating because I really needed my numbers to be good throughout school to do well,
How valuable is this background in diabetes for you in social work?
I think it's really valuable in the sense that like it's helped me kind of develop empathy for a lot of people. And also like, so like right now I work in two places. I work in like a general clinic, any age, any problem, any issue. And I also actually work specifically for chronic illness. I've never had someone with diabetes yet, but like, different chronic illness. And it definitely helps me like be able to relate to them, I guess, because of my experience and also like how much I've learned throughout school. I also like very much see kind of like the mind body connection. Like, first of all, like I told you, like the whole cortisol thing, like, yes, if you're stressed, your numbers will be harder to control, right? Or your condition, if it's, not diabetes, but also goes the other way. Like sometimes people get into this loop of like, oh my gosh, like my condition is my diabetes and my numbers are out of control. And like diabetes is just hopeless. I don't know why. Like there's just these crazy variables. It doesn't make sense. It's never going to make sense. You know what I'm saying?
No,
like
sure.
for those people,
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's true. It's like, I see why you're coming to that conclusion,
Well, when you don't have the knowledge of what's happening to you or the tools to deal with it, then everything does feel random.
Right.
And I don't know how you're supposed to control a thing that feels so random.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't know. Like, let's go into you for a second. So, you've only had diabetes for 5 years. So how are you doing with it now? Like, do you think you're where you want to be? And if so, how did you get there?
So I am happy to report to you that I do feel like I am where I want to be. And that's really why I wanted to come on. It's because I wanted to kind of like share that with everyone. Like, so I since I got diagnosed at a later age, like I remember not bolusing, I remember like not thinking about food before eating it. You know what I'm saying? Like I remember pre-diabetes days, I really made it my mission to like figure out diabetes. I was like, I'm going to get this. Like, I'm going to research diabetes. I'm going to figure everything out. Okay. So like, I remember super earlier on, I heard about your podcast and I just listened to it, man. Like, especially like all the episodes with like you and Jenny and like educational episodes or like, various other episodes where you talk to other people. And like, I learned so much from your podcast.
Glad.
And like, I started implementing them and having all this knowledge. And then I also just research in general. And then I found out about Loop. And I'm like, okay, like, yes, I'm going to figure out Loop. And then I learned so much also like through like researching that Loop. And like, this is the time where like phones hadn't come out, like Tandem and Omnipod 5 was not out yet. So like the fact that like my pumps on the phone is like a big deal still, you know what I'm saying? Like this is like 4 or 5 years ago, you know what I'm saying? So I was like ahead at diabetes technology, you know what I'm saying? Like I made it my mission to figure out everything that like all the variables. And I really want to just kind of take this opportunity to thank you for the Juicebox podcast. Like literally the amount you have brought so much into the diabetes space. And I just want to acknowledge that and appreciate that.
Thank you.
And so much of all the information I know now is due to you.
I'm glad. I appreciate knowing that. Thank you.
This is when I reached out to you. It was a while ago, actually. But I remember like listening to one podcast, and you were talking to Jenny, and you asked about like diabetes burnout. And she was like, yeah, I don't think I've ever experienced that. And I was like, man, what? Like, that's crazy. Like, I remember thinking like, man, I don't know how many people with diabetes haven't experienced burnout. Like, I am so happy for Jenny, but like that doesn't feel like
strange.
Most people.
Feels strange,
like,
right?
And I'm like, listen, I'm happy for her. I hope she never experienced a diabetes burnout, but like, that seems crazy.
But you know what? I think that just points out that how random things can be. Like,
right.
I don't imagine that Jenny would take credit for that.
Right.
Her mix of the way she eats, the way she understands insulin, her overall energy, the way she exercises, the things she does lend themselves to making diabetes less impactful. Now, I'm sure she's still impacted by it, but then there's that X factor, which I don't know how to quantify. And I've been trying to talk to people for years to, just get people's stories out so you can hear what makes other people tick and like why they're impacted by things differently than others. But yeah, Jenny's just luckily has a good mix of how she deals.
Jenny's epic. Yeah. I love her. She's great. You're great. Everyone's great. No. But I remember I sent an email to you to the extent of, I know everything. Not everything. That seems a bit like haughty. I know a lot of things about diabetes. Like I made it my mission to understand it. Like I'm the person that like people ask for like diabetes advice. You know what I'm saying? And my numbers are still not perfect every day.
Sure.
Do I have a lot of the knowledge? Yes. That still doesn't translate into like my numbers being perfect. Even though I know, like when I remember my numbers are high, I'm like, oh, I know why my numbers are high.
Of course.
But like that doesn't translate into like me being perfect all the time. And I think that was kind of what I wanted to share is like, yes, you should listen to the podcast. And yes, you should understand the variables, because if you don't know why diabetes is doing what it's doing, then it's going to be really hard for you to control your numbers.
And it's going to keep doing it. So
100%. It's going to keep doing it. And also, even once you get to that place where you really like understand diabetes, that doesn't translate into like perfect numbers all the time, you know? And I really wanted to share that a little bit, you know?
Why do you think that knowing doesn't necessarily translate into success?
It's a super good question. I think just because diabetes is really hard and we're humans and we're people, there is so much in diabetes. There's just so many factors, you know, especially when you're high or when you're low, like it really does affect your emotions a lot. Meaning like, I can't be the only person in a really bad mood when high. It's interesting. I feel like as a father, you can probably say that from like a different perspective of like, man, I don't you know, like,
yeah, no, it affects people in varied ways, and it's not a lot of fun. That's for sure.
Right. And it's like when I'm high, I'm like, no, I'm just not taking care of my numbers. You know, it's like diabetes is annoying. I know I'm high. I'm doing nothing about it, you know?
Why does that happen? Tell me why that happens. Like when you know you need to be doing something, you don't do it. What are some of the reasons that lead you not to?
I think it really comes down to not accepting diabetes. And it makes sense because it's really hard. But meaning like accepting that it's hard, accepting that some days are just hard and diabetes burnout is a real thing. And it's not like this automatic switch of like, you have diabetes burnout and you're not functioning. And the next day you don't have diabetes burnout and you are functioning. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's like not this black and white thing. It's like, yeah, like some days are harder and some days like you don't want to think about diabetes as much. And I think like not accepting it and trying to reject it leads to not taking care of it the way you should. Like in DVT, there's a concept called radical acceptance. And it's basically the idea of, the example it gives is imagine someone breaks their leg, but they're not doing anything about it. No, my leg is not broken. No, it doesn't hurt. My leg doesn't hurt. Maybe it hurts a little bit, but it's not important, you know? And they keep on like, yeah, it's not important. I'm not going to do anything about it. And they're really just in denial about the fact that their leg is really hurting, right?
Okay.
And then finally they get to this place of acceptance. Okay, my leg is really hurting me. And they accept, man, this is really frustrating. My leg is really hurting me and it hurts. And I'm not able to walk as fast and I'm not able to, you know, do the things I want to do. And then they're in this space of just like accepting how it's affecting them, right? And then once they accept the fact that their leg is hurting, then they can come up with solutions. Maybe it's a good idea to get this x-rayed, right? Maybe it's a good idea to go to the doctor and get this checked out, right? Mm-hmm. But like, you need to accept it in order, ironically, accepting where you're at then helps you to be able to come up with solutions.
Yeah.
I feel very much that way about diabetes. Like sometimes you're like, man, like you don't want to accept that you have diabetes, right? Like diabetes is really hard. There's so many variables. There's no days off, right? Like it's always kind of like in the back of your head, in the back of your mind, right? I can say for sure for me, and I think for a lot of people also, like just having a hard time accepting like, yes, this is diabetes and yes, it affects this and yes, it affects that, you know? Once you can accept it, then you can be like, okay, and not like rejecting it, then I think that's when like all those things, you know, come in, right? It's like, okay, I do have diabetes. Diabetes is really hard. I am high right now. It's really annoying to be high, right? And then once you get there, then it's like, oh, so because I'm high, maybe I should bolus. Maybe I should go on a walk, right? Maybe I should do a calming activity. So kind of to like calm myself down, to not be so stressed, right?
Yeah. In your mind, then, it's the fighting against it that stops you from, it's not that you don't know that you have diabetes, but you're not, I don't want to reuse your words so much, but you don't accept it intellectually.
Right.
Because you're fighting against it all the time. So you spend so much time fighting against the fact that it exists and you don't have time or effort to put into the actual tasks that it requires you to do.
That is really how I think about it.
Okay.
Agreed.
You're fighting the wrong fight.
Right. So exactly.
How did you get past that fight?
Ironically, I think it did come from going to social work and then seeing all these things like in a textbook and being like, oh, you know, it's like, oh,
this is how people's brains work and this is what my brain's doing.
Right. You know, it's like that was a big piece of it. And also like learning so much about it. And, you know, or there's another thing that kind of helped me is like, so when I was writing my capstone, you had to write an issue. So I obviously wrote about diabetes because I had all that information from all the papers that I have been doing the past 2 years. It wanted you to say an intervention. So I chose CBT because it's like a super, you know, evidence-based intervention, you know, really to kind of help me out with the paper because like it has like the most like data out there, you know? So I chose that. it was basically saying how like each CBT is like this idea that like there's behaviors, emotions, and thoughts. And if you impact one of those triangles, then everything else will be affected and helped also. Mm-hmm. So meaning, let's say your thought is, I have the worst case of diabetes and no one understands and no one can help me. And I'm telling you, I have it harder than everyone else who also doesn't have a working beta cells, right? Yeah. I feel like it's a common refrain that people say to themselves, right? And then it's like that leads to the emotion of like, it's hopeless and I'm sad about this and I'm upset and I'm angry and, whatever emotions people like to think, right? And then that leads to the behavior of, I'm just not doing anything about diabetes. I'm not going to pre-bolus, right? I'm not going to make sure that my settings are correct. I'm not going to carb count, right? I'm going to pretend that fat and protein doesn't impact my numbers, right? Like whatever it is, right? There's that kind of triangle. If you can impact one of those things, then you can impact the others. So for example, if you, let's say, impact the thought, be like, oh, hey, actually, I listened to Scott's podcast. It's really great. And I can do X, Y, and Z, and then maybe I'll feel better, right? So you have this like more optimistic thought. And then that leads to the emotions like, okay, I can do this, determination, right? Like not being as down, right? Mm-hmm. And then that leads to the behavior of, okay, so I'm going to pre-bolus right now. Or like, I'm going to bolus properly. I'm going to carb count. I'm going to whatever it is, So, but you can impact any place on that triangle, whatever works for you. Like sometimes, like, even though it's like, no, everything is stupid and everything is dumb and I'm high and I don't want to do anything. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't want to do anything, but like, let me impact the behavior. I'm going to give insulin, right? And then that behavior, I gave insulin, my numbers start going down, and then that impacts my emotions, I'm happier, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, like I can do diabetes. Like this works. I know the tools. I got this, Yeah. You can kind of help that triangle also. Like, so like those were things like just going to school and like seeing that like, it doesn't have to be a catastrophe. Like if you have a diabetes burnout day, it doesn't mean that like something's seriously wrong with you and that like the world is ending. Mm-hmm. It's really normal. It's okay. Accept the emotion, accept that it's hard. It's okay. And then you can work on it because like you have the tools.
And you're not fighting against the reality.
Right.
Okay.
Like people with diabetes, people with chronic conditions are more likely to develop, 30% more likely to develop depression, 30% more likely to develop anxiety. And it's a real thing. And I'm not minimizing that. And also having a bad diabetes day doesn't mean you have severe depression. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go get into that spiral. You can just be like, okay, diabetes is hard.
Yeah. So some people are depressed, but sometimes you think that they're not depressed, but they're having a depressive experience or a bad day or something like that. And then you kind of stay in that day by fighting against it instead of what? Instead of accepting it, moving on?
Instead of just accepting it, being with the emotion, meaning like one of the criterion actually in depression or anxiety. And again, I'm depressed. It's a real thing. I'm not minimizing it all. Like I'm a social worker. Don't worry. Mm-hmm. And also one of the criterion is it disturbs you, greatly affects your life. So like there's all these like psychological, there's all these like physical symptoms, right? Like not sleeping or being restless, on edge, And also that's one part of it. A second part of it is like, how much does it affect your life and how much is it distressing you? Mm-hmm. So meaning if you can like deal with that part of like, this isn't distressing, this is normal. It's hard having diabetes. Some days are harder to manage than others. Like it's okay. And then that doesn't have to be a distressing thought when you don't want to deal with diabetes that day.
Is it like walking in the rain and some people splash in the puddles and some people step in them and go, oh, my foot's wet. You're both in the puddle. It's your inclination. But you're saying to some degree, like you can decide how to react for some people?
Yeah. I definitely think you can decide how to react. And even if you do have depression, you do have anxiety, you do have these things, like you still have the power to react. It'll probably be more difficult for you than someone who doesn't have those diagnoses, right? Mm-hmm. That's what the CBT intervention is all about, or DBT. It's like you have the power to decide how to act. And I personally am the person who like loves splashing the puddles, and I'm like, oh, I have rain boots. I should get my rain boots. I should wear rain boots today so I can splash in the puddles. You know what I'm saying? Like that's me. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, yes.
Do you leave space for the idea that some people just can't be the splash in the puddle people? that like they step in the puddle and they just, it's not a conscious decision to think my foot's wet. Like it's just how it hits them.
Yeah. And then it just makes me sad. Everyone has different dispositions. And like, I do have a happier disposition. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have this very distinct memory of high school of like, being like, it's raining. And like turning to my friend and be like, we should for sure go out during our lunch break and splash in all the puddles, right? Yeah. And we did. And then it was not so thought out because the rest of the day we were like soaking wet, but like it was fine.
I do. But I'll tell you, like I've made a lot of podcast episodes, spoken to a lot of people, and I struggle between wanting to lean into how I feel and saying to people, just do this, right? Like I do this, do that. Like it to me, it smacks terribly of, it's been very popular over the last couple of years for incredibly athletic, strong people to make you a podcast and tell you about how to, just go work out. Are you upset? You're fat. You should just work out like I do. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
and then you too will have incredible abs, right? Yeah.
It's easy when it's your disposition, such an interesting word, because it's easy when it's the way your brain's wired and the way the chemicals fly around in your body. When all your shit works that way and you have the outcome that you're describing, it's super simple to say to somebody, have the outcome that I'm describing by doing what I do. And as much as I believe that you can kind of be the master of your path, I also genuinely believe that I've spoken to people who do not have that ability. And it's often because their wiring's different or their chemicals are different. They have depression, or they are not the kind of people who look out and go, I'm going to go splash in the puddle. They're the kind of people who look outside and go, oh, it's raining. The day has been ruined. I try very hard to give space to the fact that I think it's absolutely true.
Right.
But I also do believe that you can fall into a hole and then throw yourself into it the rest of the way.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And for people like that, like me, like I'm a social worker. I'll tell you to go to therapy. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't think that's bad. I think it's normal, so meaning like,
let me say this. If you're a social worker, then you deal with people who have financial issues.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so you can't just look at them and go, well, just make more money.
Right.
Right. The problem is you can't afford your bills. You're not making enough money. Go make more money. Like, that's not how that works. So
maybe a business person would tell that to them.
Well, yeah, but my point is that if you're sad, you can't tell somebody stop being sad. It doesn't work that way.
Agreed.
Right.
Agreed. 100%.
Right.
Some people, right, your brain is wired different ways, and like you might need a medication. That's okay. It's nothing to be ashamed of. You might benefit greatly from therapy. That's okay. Nothing to be ashamed of. You can almost tell like I'm a social worker and that I've dealt with these things, and that I have clients.
Well, it's funny. I realize you keep saying CBT, and not one of us has qualified that as cognitive behavioral therapy.
Oh, sorry, everyone.
Yeah, no. That's and you're young too.
Yeah.
So because I think you're an upbeat person, and I don't think you lean towards like depression, right? I think that, and you're younger, and I'm telling you, when you're younger, it is pretty much hardwired in most people just to be like, just do the thing. I watch it work every day. Just go do the thing. And
right.
You have to be alive longer to see that it just doesn't always work that way. And it's not as easy as what you'll hear on social media or in media in general, or when people are out there just, pitching their idea. Like, everyone's not fat because they eat too much.
Right. 100%.
I just had an experience this week where on Wednesday, I used my GLP medication, right?
Okay.
And it has a shorter half-life. So you shoot it once a week, but it's not at its full power on day 6.
Okay.
It wanes as it goes. I watched this thing happen 2 weeks ago. I shoot it on Wednesday, and on Tuesday, Arden was home from school, and her and a friend came home with a pizza. Okay. And I had 2 small slices of thin crust, not a lot of cheese pizza. And I woke up the next day a couple of pounds heavier.
Okay.
And yesterday I was, Wednesday, shot on Wednesday. So then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So 5 days later, I say to myself, you know what? We have a couple of these 2.5 pens, low dose pens. I'm on a much higher dose, but I'm 5 days into my shot. I know this is going to wane day 5, 6, and 7. I'm going to shoot this 2.5. Right? So I took it out of the refrigerator. We had this extra 2.5, and I shot it. And I was like, okay. And then late last night, somebody in my house comes home with that same pizza. And I was like, I'll have pizza. So I had the same 2 slices, but 5 hours later in the day. So I ate these slices of pizza and I went to bed a couple of hours later, right? And I woke up this morning and I hadn't gained weight.
Whoa.
So I'm going to say to you that my body doesn't properly make whatever GLP is. Okay. And
Right.
so when I'm replacing it synthetically and eating normally, and I know you're like, pizza's not normal, but if you could just see this pizza, it's the thinnest crust. It barely has any cheese on it. It's like sauce and a tiniest bit of bread. Like, but my experience, weeks prior was ate the pizza without like a full dose of the GLP happening, gained weight, ate it without it, didn't gain weight. So now think about that like mental health or depression or anxiety. If your levels aren't right where they're supposed to be, you end up getting a result that's not optimal and not what you want.
100%. And you don't need to tell me these things.
No,
like,
I know,
I
but
know.
people listening, you're being very positive, which is good. But I'm trying to step in for the people out there who might be listening who are going like, yeah, it ain't that easy, honey. Like, do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I kind of realize that. And I also want to share that like, this isn't because my journey with diabetes has been easy. And I do want to tell everyone else that also, meaning like when I was going through school, like I was constantly getting ketones. My weight fluctuated like crazy because I kept on getting ketones because my numbers kept on being high and I was just in this perpetual state of like just diabetes burnout. And I wasn't taking care of myself, and to the point where like, I think I was in DKA for a week and like, I didn't go to the hospital, like meaning like I had severe nausea, severe headaches, throwing up.
You're just ignoring it.
I didn't go to the hospital. I don't know. Again, like I was like 20. So I was still like in that teenage phase of like, oh no, I don't need to go to the doctor. And like, what I'm saying? I don't really know what was going through my head, but like, I mean, like I've been there in the place where it's like, oh my gosh, like major diabetes burnout. I don't want to deal with diabetes, like majorly impacting my life. Like my numbers were crazy. They were all over the place, like to the point where I was losing weight crazy because of ketones and gaining weight back. And then, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, just having all those symptoms and like, I've been there.
And this all happened to you because you just weren't using insulin the way you needed to?
Just wasn't using insulin the way I needed to. And this was when I had all the information already. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I knew what to do, and I knew what to do. And I was just in this diabetes burnout phase. And it took months of just like trying to accept diabetes. And it was only like after months of like being in this super unhealthy state. And now we look back at it, I'm like, why did I think it was normal to just all of a sudden like wake up like 7 pounds thinner? I don't actually have a scale in my house, so I actually couldn't see. My family knows I have my skinny clothes and my fat clothes. All right. I literally had different sizes for when I was like my normal weight and then like my skinny weight because like I had ketones and I wasn't taking care of my body the way I should have. Like, and looking back at it, I'm like, wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And dangerous too. Like you're lucky that it didn't have worse outcomes for you.
I know. I'm very grateful that nothing drastic happened.
What flipped your switch? Like what made you do it?
I think just coming to terms with diabetes. It took a while for me. School was very stressful, even though I was doing amazing in school. But I was living away from home for the first time. Just getting used to basic taking care of myself. At the same time of like learning how to do that with a relatively new diagnosis because I hadn't had any really experience taking care of myself with diabetes previous to that. And like just the stress of just school is stressful. Especially like a master's program,
Yeah.
And a good master's program,
Well, you also have like cultural issues too, right? Around food or no?
I love food.
Yeah. But is some of the food you eat more difficult to deal with than what other people might have to deal with?
It's funny because like, I don't think about that because it's such a normal part of my culture. But like, yeah, like every week on Saturday, on Shabbos, like I basically eat a Thanksgiving / Christmas dinner every week. You know what I'm saying? Like I find it funny when like there's like these podcasts like how to deal with Thanksgiving dinner. And I'm like, girl,
you mean Saturday?
it's like I deal with that every think.
Well, yeah, but I mean, listen, I've been privy to those meals and they are carb centric in a way that is probably hard to put into words. And fat heavy
so
too.
Much fat, so much protein. But again, like right now, because I'm in a healthier place, like I'm able to go through that meal and not get high. But like 2 years ago, I wasn't able to.
Are you limiting the food you're eating, or do you know how to bolus for it?
I know how to bolus for it. Like I don't limit my food. I like food.
Yeah.
I eat food really well. I'm very good at eating food.
I eat food well.
I'm also good at knowing how to bolus for it when I have the headspace for it.
Talk about when you don't have the headspace for it. Like I hear people say this all the time. Like I don't count carbs well. They say it like it's not a knowable thing. You know, I don't do well with counting carbs. I actually yesterday morning Arden bolus for something, and I looked at it and I was like, hey, that's not enough insulin for what you're about to eat. And she goes, no, it's going to be like 45. And I was like, this is going to be like 90.
Okay.
It was just pancakes, right? Like it was just pancakes. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, no, for sure. And she goes, I thought it was 45. And I said, well, here on the package, it says 90. I was like, so it's not an unknowable thing is what I'm saying. So when I hear people say, I don't carb count well, what I assume in my mind is what they mean is I'm sick of counting these carbs.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's right. 100%. Meaning like, I know how to carb count. I know that I need a pre-bolus. I know how to do like, you know, the extend bolus / like feature for fat and protein.
Mm-hmm.
I know how good exercising is and how beneficial that is for your numbers. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know how to do all those things, but your question was,
yeah, go ahead.
But your question was like, how do you deal with that when you're not in the mood? Not as well.
And why does it happen like that? Because like, for example, it's the amount of effort you have to put into counting the carbs, right? And so there's an amount of effort you put into pressing on the brake on your car while you're driving. So you never start going through a curve and thinking, well, I'm supposed to press down 3/4 on this brake, but I don't feel like it. So I'm just going to press down 1/4 on the brake and crash into the trees on the side of the road. Like, but people do that with their diabetes all the time. They're like, well, I should take a second to count these carbs, push on the brake, but I'm not going to because I don't feel like it. So I'm going to crash into the diabetes bushes. And my blood sugar is going to be 350 for the next 4 hours. But oh well. And I know I don't have diabetes. And I'm sure if I did, I'd be like, yeah, no, I understand exactly what you're saying. And I can't quantify it either. I just keep looking for someone to quantify it for me.
I think that there's just, first of all, it doesn't feel as immediate. Like it doesn't feel like, I mean, like you want to live, right? Like it's a natural thing within people that like, you know, there's this natural instinct. You're going to hopefully know how to press on the brakes of the car.
Right.
So you'll be fine, right? But meaning like when you're high, it doesn't feel like an immediate threat, I guess. And the immediate threat feels like when I'm in that kind of like diabetes burnout headspace, the immediate threat feels like taking care of my numbers I won't be able to handle it. Right.
Well, it might not feel like it, but you consciously, you do know that that's not true.
Oh, for sure. But that doesn't help.
To harken back to earlier in the conversation, by the way, this is out of nowhere, but you said haughty earlier. And I don't think anyone's ever said that on the podcast before. To harken back to earlier, when we mentioned Jenny wouldn't not bolus.
Right. And I also wouldn't not bolus, but if I was in a kind of burnout state, I might, or I might not be bolus.
I know. I'm saying like
later on.
That right there, like, I don't know that we'll ever understand it, but that right there is what I want to understand.
Yeah.
Why does that happen to someone? I'm not coming from like the bro podcast guys. I'm not saying, why do you do it to yourself? I'm saying, how does it happen? What different variables, circumstances, feelings, emotions, etc., come together to make someone say, I don't care if I press on the brake hard enough. I'm just going to go into the trees and let be what's going to be. And is there a way to impact it? Maybe even if we understood it, we wouldn't be able to impact it. But I'm right now stuck on understanding it.
Yeah.
That's all. And I don't think, I don't know if I'm ever going to, but I keep waiting for somebody to give me an answer.
I think it's just diabetes is really tiring and really exhausting. And like, sometimes you're just in this state of like, diabetes is hard, that you're not able to like logically think through what needs to happen. It's not really logical because again, like I know everything to do, right? And sometimes I don't do it. And I think it comes from like a more like emotional, really human place. Like, I don't think it can be explained by like logic. Oh, it makes sense if someone's not taking care of the numbers. Like, it makes sense if you don't know what to do. That makes sense. And I hope that you can get the tools, you can listen to the podcast, find friends to help you. But like, in terms of like,
once you know
all the tools and not doing it, I just think it comes from a superhuman place of like, diabetes is hard. And sometimes you're just in that headset of like, I'm just overwhelmed with diabetes right now. And I just don't want to do it. And I don't think there's a logical reason for it.
Maybe sometimes you're just like asleep at the wheel. Yeah.
Right. Just like not wanting to feel it, not wanting to see it, kind of going through the motions, but not really thinking so hard into it, Is it valuable in that moment for someone to help? Like, do you have a partner or somebody you date or somebody in your life that could help you? So I definitely, So I'm really grateful that I have a lot of really great supports, and I am married, and I do have a really supportive partner who really understands diabetes, which is very helpful. And sometimes he'll be like, "Do you think that maybe we should go on a walk?" And I'm like, "Maybe that's a good idea," or sometimes he'll be like, "Maybe you should drink a lot of water right now." Mm-hmm. I'm like, "That's a good idea." Do you ever push back though when he says like, "Maybe we should go on a walk"? Do you ever say, "Maybe you should mind your own business"? Well, I told him that he can never tell me when I'm high that I'm in a bad mood because I'll yell at him. So I told him that I'm generally fairly receptive to solutions because I know I need to do them, but I just like don't have the energy to like think of them or implement them. So like if someone's doing it with me, then like I'll be more likely to do it, Okay. Like I'll be like, okay, I'll go on a walk. Okay, fine. That sounds like a good idea. I'll usually say no and then get up to go on a walk. Yeah. Like, no. And then I'll be like, okay, then I'll like put my sneakers on, You know what's funny? I guess what's hard for me, and maybe not hard, that's the wrong word. What drives me to want to understand is making the podcast. Mm-hmm. I feel like if a life is 90 years long, right? Mm-hmm. It's possible that I have spoken to someone who's lived through every year of that life. Yeah. If you take all the people, I kind of think of like all the people that I've spoken to, if you press them together into one person with diabetes, I've spoken to someone who's raised a 9-month-old with diabetes. I've spoken to someone who's had diabetes when they were 65 and 44 and 37 and 18 and 72. And I've heard the stories. I know where the story's going to end if you are writing it the way the 72-year-old wrote it or the way the 53. Like, do you know what I mean? Does that make sense to you? Like, it's possible I'm having such a unique experience that I don't know how to explain it to other people. Mm-hmm. But if diabetes is a write your own story, you used to be able to like get these records. And records are these wax discs that people would listen to. Okay, all right. So you used to be able to get these records and they would come with a book. And then you could read up to a certain spot and then decide which way the story went next, right? And then you could drop the needle on the record to like pick up the story in a different place. Oh, that's fun. I'm very old. But I feel like diabetes is like that. And in a world where you can pick the needle up and put it back down where you want it to go, you can, with some certainty, write a good story for yourself. But at the same time, you can also make decisions that end up with the story not going well. Yeah. And when we know that, it's weird to me that we know that, and sometimes people pick the needle up and put it back down. I'm going to try meth. I'm being serious. All right. No, 100%. Yeah. I'm laughing because it's true. I'm laughing because of the truth in that statement. It's like Saturday and you get up and you're like, I'm bored. And the answer isn't, I think I'm going to go for a walk and check out Wicked tonight. The answer is, I think I'm going to sleep till 3, binge drink, and do cocaine with friends. I don't know how people decide to put the needle down where they decide to put it down. I can tell you that it's not coming from a logical place, and it's coming from an emotional place. And probably in drugs, also coming from a place in a lot of just pain. It's not coming from a logical place. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can't be because, like, sure, you know the facts. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's coming from, like, an emotional place. It's coming from a resistance place. It's coming from... no, but people, knowing the facts don't help people, like, process them because people are still like, cocaine, it's a party drug. I'll be okay. Do you know what I mean? Or, like, just a little bit of meth.
isn't going to hurt anybody. I'm not going to end up toothless in a field, except maybe you will.
Right.
And so for me, like that, like if you want to know like why I've never done meth, for example, it's because I wouldn't want that to happen to me. But that's also an overly simplistic answer. But the real answer, going back to what I said earlier, is it doesn't occur to me to do. So yes, there are people out there who it occurs to them to do it that way, or maybe they're they're more risk adverse or less risk adverse or whatever. Maybe they're looking for that jolt. I have no idea. Like, right. Like maybe some people just need that, like, and I don't need that. Like, I don't need whatever that is that like, zzz, like, you know, like, let's do it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't really have that in me. Like I took off yesterday, like, which is a weird thing to say. Like I didn't do anything on Sunday, which is incredibly uncommon for me, right? Like, so I got up, I didn't do anything. I was like, I'm going to watch I'm going to make breakfast for people. I'm going to watch the football game. Afterwards, I'm going to watch a TV show that I enjoy. And then I'm going to go to bed.
Amazing.
I didn't drink 9 beers while I was doing it. I didn't like, as a matter of fact, had somebody not shown up with that pizza, I don't even know if I would have eaten anything last night. And I don't think I'm special or doing something right. I just don't understand, like, why doesn't it occur to me to do meth? If I'm sick, why do I take the pills when I'm supposed to? At the times that I'm supposed to, on the days that I'm supposed to? Like, why don't I just go, oh, I forgot today's, it's okay, I'll take it tomorrow. I don't have that in me. Arden has that. Arden's like, oh, I forgot my thyroid medication, I'll take 2 tomorrow. Like, and I'm like, no, don't do that. And she goes, it's not a big deal. And I'm like, no, yes, it is. And she goes, no, it's not. I'm fine. And like, do you understand? Like, you talk to a lot of people who have a lot of issues in their life. Have you ever once looked and thought, I see a common thread on how someone ends up in this position?
It always comes from trauma, from pain, from emotional stuff, and whatever that is. Meaning, like, sometimes I look at people's choices, I'm like, I don't know about that one.
But Emily, I promise you, I grew up like a feral dog in the street. I promise you I'm not making that up, okay? Like, I promise you, I have known that I'm adopted since I can remember, right? So, like, and it does impact me, by the way. Like, I think anybody who listens to this knows, like, I have a genuine fear of abandonment. Like, right? Like, I'm probably as good of a dad as I am because I don't want everybody to, like, leave. I'm not stupid. Like, I understand how that works. But my dad also used to kick the shit out of us.
Oh, gosh.
Right? Not all the time, but enough that you were like, is this the moment when I'm going to, like, get kicked in the, like, literally kicked in the ass? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, am I going to get backhanded here? Like, is that going to happen? Like, I definitely heard my brother get belted in a bathtub for splashing.
Oh, my gosh.
Like, right? Like, I lived through that. And I still didn't do meth. Like, why not? Like, you understand that this entire podcast is just a journey of me trying to figure out why I'm not on cocaine. I'm really fascinated by that aspect of it. And I think diabetes is twisted right up along with it.
Right.
Like, the amount of illegal drugs that come into our country every year would astound you, like, by weight. Right? Go look it up sometime. Like how like how much comes in by weight, right? And it isn't it ain't sitting in people's cupboards waiting for Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? Like it's being used. And I admit and I agree that trauma drives people towards stuff like that. But then why doesn't trauma drive everybody towards that?
It's also your personality, right? Meaning, like, you're an upbeat personality, you're very resilient, right? Like, meaning, like, those are protective factors.
Like, what does that mean, though?
I don't know, man.
Emily, you're 23. I'm trying to put you on the path because I'm getting old and I'm not going to be able to finish this fight, I don't think. Right? Like that's what I want people to wonder. I want them to look at their lives and wonder, like, why do I do the things I do? That's all.
Listen, like, right. Like, everyone, it's interesting because I'll see 2 people and they have let's say they have very similar stories, right? They have totally different responses, right? Like, meaning, like, someone may develop, like, borderline at a, like, they're borderline as a result of, their past. And other people are like, yeah, it's kind of difficult, but, like, I'm doing fine. And they come in for something completely different, like, it's so curious to me. Like, I don't have a good answer necessarily, like.
You heard me ask Jenny, like, why do you do these things the right way? She doesn't know either.
Right.
Yeah. It's not just people who are screwing up that don't know why they do it. People who are doing well don't know why they're doing it, which is what leads to, like, guys with 0% body fat on a podcast to say something stupid like, yeah, man, you just got to get up in the morning and eat your protein and do your stuff. Like, oh, is that all I have to do? Thanks, asshole. Sure. That's the thing. I don't know that we'll ever figure out why some people are, I get up every morning and I go for a run and I only eat 4 ounces of chicken and I definitely do this and everything in my life is perfect. And some of those people get diabetes and they translate that to diabetes. And some people who are more like, I don't know, man, like I'll take it when I think of it. Those people get diabetes too. Like we're never going to figure out. I don't think we'll ever figure out why you are who you are. But I just think it would be valuable if people knew who they were in this scenario. Mm-hmm. Like maybe that would help them along the way.
There's so many factors, meaning like even within the same family, right? Like you still have different parents, meaning like even siblings, like, parents treat you a little bit differently. You're born at different times, even if it's close in age to each other. Like you have different classes, you have different, you have different circumstances. And meaning, like when you look into studies about like, oh, what makes people resilient, what makes people handle it or not, like there's some basic factors, more positive people, more resilient people. There's protective factors, and there's also factors that make it more difficult. Like, if various traumas could make it more likely for you to develop, psychological disorders, right? Or, to have a hard time mentally.
And I don't think it's got anything to do with how much money you have or how good your parenting was, or like, I just think some people make a left turn and some people make a right turn, and you're never going to know why. Maybe it's just one of those things I should stop thinking about. Like, honestly, like maybe it's just, it is what it is. And we're not going to come to any answers. And some people are going to wake up one day and say, hey, I should look into this. And they do. And some people wake up one day and just go, hey, I'm going to ride this out. I'm not looking to change.
I would have a good reason or a good explanation. But like what the message that I do want to say is that like, it makes sense that sometimes it's harder for you to manage your diabetes some days. When I say you, like the general you.
Yeah.
And also, and listening and having the tools will help you once you kind of get to that place of, okay, what can I do to help myself? Like I have diabetes. It's really hard. There's something I can do right now, Right. And like sometimes like on those harder days, it's just like, you know what? I'm going to pre-bolus. That's what I'm going to do. Or I'm just going to make sure that my carbs are counted correctly, even though I'm not pre-bolusing, Mm-hmm. And doesn't have to be anything drastic, but just whatever you're able to handle that day, and like kind of both, like on the one hand, yes, first know the information that's really helpful. And also if that information doesn't help you, like that's normal and you're a normal person and you're human and diabetes is hard. And also
for sure,
there are so many things you can do to help yourself, like kind of like holding both of that and like why it's easier for some people and why it's harder for some people. It's like, I don't know.
If anybody can take anything and apply it from another person, I can just tell you that my simplest piece of advice is that I don't take bad things from yesterday to the next day.
Yeah.
I wake up every day and I'm like, start over. Like this is a new day.
Yeah. And very much I feel that way about diabetes. Like I guess because I do have good settings. Like every morning I wake up a good number. You know what I'm saying? So It's like, doesn't matter what happened yesterday. Not every day, but like a lot of days.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what happened yesterday. Like diabetes is a hard day yesterday. If I went up super high, like today is a new day to start diabetes again. And like, I don't have to hold yesterday's, like bad things that happened or hard parts. Like I don't have to hold that to the next day, like that happened. It's okay. I learned from it, you move on, like not kind of worrying too much about it and settling too much about it and like thinking about it. Like, it's okay. You made a mistake. Hopefully you learn from it. Actually, something that you said, if something doesn't work out in your diabetes management, don't like be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened. Reflect. Why do you think it didn't work out? And then you learn from it as opposed to needing to go through it again and again and again.
Yeah. Can't beat yourself up. Yeah. You just can't continue to beat yourself up over things. Like you just take the lesson and move on.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Let's stop on that because I think that's perfect.
I think that's awesome.
This was wonderful. I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on and doing this.
Thank you.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. It's a great perspective because you are young.
Yeah.
But you're thinking about things. I can't stay alive forever. If I could, I'd love to talk to you like 20 years from now and see like all the things you figured out. You know what I mean? Like, because it's interesting. You don't know this because you're 23 and this is the smartest you've ever been right now. Like, but
that's right.
Yeah. But yeah, which is awesome. When you're 53 and you look at a 23-year-old, like you go, oh, I wonder when At what point will this fill in for her? Where will she see this or have enough experiences where that'll make more sense? It's lovely to see a well-intended person thinking about things like this when they're young. It's interesting. It's an interesting time. So I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
It's funny. Like I am young, and it also feels like I've lived so much of life already just because of diabetes and because of social work and because of, everything that I have seen, and like, I'm probably going to laugh at myself in like 20 years, you know what I'm saying?
Also, because of your culture, you get married earlier too. And that does ground you pretty quickly.
Yeah. 100%.
Do you have 75 kids yet, or are you still working on that part?
Almost. I'm working on the 74th right now.
Do you have kids?
No.
No? Are you thinking about it?
Definitely thinking about it. Would be excited and grateful when that happens. And,
Awesome. Okay. All right. Listen to me. I'm going to let you go. You were terrific. Hold on one second. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Dexcom G7, and the Dexcom G7 warms up in just 30 minutes. Check it out now at dexcom.com/juicebox. The podcast you just enjoyed was sponsored by Tandem Diabetes Care. Learn more about Tandem's newest automated insulin delivery system, Tandem Mobi with Control-IQ Plus technology at tandemdiabetes.com/juicebox. There are links in the show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com. Okay, well, here we are at the end of the episode. You're still with me? Thank you. I really do appreciate that. What else could you do for me? Why don't you tell a friend about the show or leave a 5-star review? Maybe you could make sure you're following or subscribed in your podcast app. Go to YouTube and follow me, or Instagram, TikTok. Oh gosh, here's one. Make sure you're following the podcast in the private Facebook group as well as the public Facebook page. You don't want to miss, please. Do you not know about the private group? You have to join the private group. As of this recording, it has 51,000 members in it. They're active, talking about diabetes. Whatever you need to know, there's a conversation happening in there right now. And I'm there all the time. Tag me. I'll say hi. The Diabetes Variables series from the Juicebox Podcast goes over all the little things that affect your diabetes that you might not think about. From travel and exercise to hydration and even trampolines. Juiceboxpodcast.com. Go up in the menu and click on Diabetes Variables. Hey, what's up, everybody? If you've noticed that the podcast sounds better and you're thinking like, how does that happen? What you're hearing is Rob at Wrong Way Recording doing his magic to these files. So if you want him to do his magic to you, wrongwayrecording.com. You got a podcast? You want somebody to edit it? You want Rob.